What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another weekly update where I like to provide you events, earnings, and stock picks for the upcoming week. If that sounds like something you're interested in, consider subscribing as I do provide daily updates as well. Considering that the market is ever changing on every minute, you want to be up to date, and that's what I like to provide. Again, this is strictly my opinion, and I always believe that you should always have your own thesis going into each and every day. I provide mine to and helps hope guide you on your journey as well. But again, I think it's important that you provide your own thesis going into each and every day. So, being said, I want to go ahead and first bring up what I normally do on weekly updates, kind of outlook of the upcoming week. There's kind of a lot to go over as far as like upcoming things, especially when you start getting around earnings. Just something I've been talking about the past couple of weeks. We start hitting up banks first this week. As you can see, these are just some of the ones I'm looking at. You got JPM on Wednesday. You got Wells Fargo Thursday. And then you also have, of course, the events of the war, Russia, Ukraine. If there's any kind of peace talks or anything that goes on with that, that can always dictate direction of the markets. There is a lot of data today, and I'm not going to this week, and I'm not going to sit here and list everything. What I list on this document is essentially what I think carries the most weight for the week. And the biggest one is, of course, CPI this week. Again, I don't think it's going to hold as much weight as it typically does because we already know time frame. We already know what the Fed is doing. They've been very vocal about that, and every essentially media outlet is advertised that because that is a hot topic of inflation. So even though we have core CPI, I think that is not really going to matter at this point. What matters is ultimately bond buying. Moving forward, when we realize that our backstop is removed, that will ultimately dictate direction of market at that given point. Now, Fed has threatened this past week that, hey, we can remove it at any time. I think the market was already well aware of that. I think the market was expecting on that in the last Fed meeting, but it didn't happen because we had a war going on. Again, that was unforeseen. They were ready to do it, and then the war started, so they continued to keep it there. Again, it's a backstop for our financial system. It needs to be there in case everybody wants to rush to the bank and pull their money out. If it is not there, it could crumble our financial system. So that I think will continue to remain there until the war is over. Again, they can still stop some asset purchasing, but they're not going to go 100% on it. I think that backstop will be there till then. So being said, it's interesting to see going forward on how we start doing earnings. Now, to determine with inflation and sanctions and everything that's going on, the banks are going to give us a good gauge on what is going on. So we got that this week. So we're going to kind of determine how the economy is essentially holding through all of this. The bank is a good gauge for that. So that's why we kind of start out with banks, and then we start hitting up other earnings, and then we kind of get Netflix first to kind of determine how big tech will do, which is, I believe, next week or the week after that. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, as far as watch lists, one thing I've noticed is there's not a lot of big movements in any stocks. Again, I think it's going to be this week or next week. I think typically this week, the market kind of holds flat because it's trying to determine, especially how the market sentiment is right now. With given everything, I think the market might kind of remain flat until it starts getting earnings from the banks, especially since it's a very sensitive time with our financial structure. So we want to see how the banks are doing. If the banks do good, I think that's a good sign, and the markets will start moving off that going into the pre-market run-up, I think, in my opinion. And once you start seeing the charts and I start showing you the charts, it will make more sense that it would start doing that. Again, any other new news can dictate the market very quickly. So just be aware of that. The market is very sensitive to any information. This is why I do daily updates, because it matters day to day. What I believe right now could change come Monday morning with any kind of event that comes up. So You can't hold anybody 100% in the stock market. You can't hold anybody 100% because it changes that fast. So being said, our watch list, Tesla, again, I have a lot of the same ones. I have Tesla, UPST, Shop. Google has one of the biggest moves I've seen coming into this week. You'll see why when I look at the chart there. AMD, a lot of these are actually technical wise, they look very good. They're all kind of set up for the weeks to come here. So that's what I'm kind of looking at for this week. So first things first, looking at, let's see here, SPX, we're getting into this big consolidation box. We aren't in a downward channel here. I think this will also ultimately be a nice breakout. We might actually see a lot of really tight chop coming into banks is kind of what I'm thinking here. I was looking for this pullback into strong support. This is the first bounce off of the first break. This isn't really considered a bounce in my opinion. You're going to get a retest and then a real nice pop, and then you'll get an actual bounce, actual retest, and then bounce is what I'm looking for. So if the banks do well, I can see a really strong, sharp move out of here back to all-time highs. If not, I think we might just break down a little bit lower, possibly down to that 4,400 mark, and just kind of chop into big tech. That could be a possibility too. So it really just depends on what kind of message we get this week. But I do really like to set up. A lot of technicals look this way, so that's what I'm kind of looking at. Now, again, watching this level here, we've been holding this 44.82 very well. If you go in the lower time frames, we've been consolidating. The market doesn't want to sell past this point. It's been doing, again, very, very well. We're starting to kind of hit that top channel. If I actually clean this up a little bit better on the hourly, you can see it better. This is why I like to drop down in the 1 hour time frame, because you can catch a better eye of what's going on. But again, that's what I believe on the daily. Again, on the daily, I think we're getting ready to break here, and then this will determine how the banks do this week. So that's what I am watching there. Bitcoin, a lot of people are kind of panicking because it's selling again, but we're still holding that kind of that top level here, and that's what matters. I think once we get information on the bank, I think we can get a nice rip out of here. Again, we can go lower. I'm not, again, concerned unless we start breaking that 32, and then I think at that point, then we're in a different state of mind if Bitcoin breaks below that. In my opinion, I think the market in general, the market sentiment in general will be bad if we do break that low. Again, strictly my opinion. Now, Tesla is the first one I have. And as you can see, Tesla has been sitting at the support, just like the market. It had that initial break. It's gone way up. And I know I talk about a pullback, but Tesla's kind of its own animal. This thing can go parabolic and briefly retest and continue rocketing back up. Again, they had great delivery numbers. Production numbers are down, but I don't think that's going to be really reflected too much on this earnings. We might see a little bit more on the next one, but they do overcome a lot of different hurdles very well. That's one thing they do very well. And you kind of got a descending wedge here, somewhat going into this week, and Tesla is really going to lead. And this is really what I've been kind of watching. Because of this fact, you get that first break and that first retest, you'll get a very nice bounce out of this. And on the daily, when you have a big wedge like this, you can get a really nice rip. I think we get a really nice rip, at least up to the 108. And then again, I don't think we're gonna break the 1150 mark, at least not till we get actual earnings numbers. Once we actually get earnings numbers, then I think we're gonna actually rip from that point. And right now they have it listed for the 20th. So April 20th will be, it looks like that's official too. You can tell if it's official or not, because normally if there's a question mark here, that means it's kind of just predicted. It's not actually listed yet. So Really watching this one closely. Again, it's been holding that 1030 mark very well. So looking for at least try to ride. It's filled the gap as well here. So once it's filled the gap, it should be good to go. Downward. There's a lot of really bullishness to this. As long as the general market sentiment is good, I think this thing can start ripping. So again, watching this very closely this week. I actually have calls on this covering earnings because I think there's not going to be a bad catalyst to drive us down unless the banks do horribly bad or we get some new news that drives us down. I think we're going to continue up to all-time highs at this point. And because of earnings, will do that for us, I believe. And then again, like I said, after that, we're going to have the Fed, and then that point, it's going to it might get a little messy from that point. UPST is the other one I have. Downward channel. Watching this bottom channel, I know there's strong support here, essentially around that 87 mark, but you could get a retest as bottom channel. If it does retest the bottom channel, I mean, you could be looking around that 70 mark, possibly. I'll try to pick it up there to get at least a nice bounce to the top channel. But again, I mean, they're estimated not till May, but we'll have to see. But this is one I want to watch. If we start heading towards that bottom channel, first I want to see if it holds here, again at the 87. You could get a hold here and then a back test to the weekly to the 97. That could be something to watch. But again, if it breaks lower than that, I want to see where that lower level goes. Now, Shop is the next one I have here. Shop, same kind of thing. You got kind of a descending wedge here. I'm kind of watching. It's at a nice base here at the 588. Again, if it breaks that, I can definitely see a 580. If the market turns, this is definitely one I want to watch. Watching that 585 break back down to the 510 mark. If it does retest that, I definitely want to grab it at that point. But Shop is definitely what I want to watch. Again, I think if this thing reverses, if we get solid earnings, I think this thing will rocket back up to 1K pretty quick. So definitely what I want to watch. Again, if we could even get a break of this wedge and get a retest at that 677. Again, if we reverse here, it would be a higher low. So looking for a higher high. I think we could start breaking up, possibly get that pre-earnings run up. It's kind of what I'm looking at. So again, when you start getting pre-market run up, you want to find your top stocks and be very watching these like a hawk because again, everything's going to flip and start running very quickly. So it's good to have kind of a list of what you want going into earnings. And I think Shop will do very well. The whole e-commerce space might be questionable because of sanctions and lockdowns, depending on where materials are coming from. So, I mean, Shop is great because it is a services-based thing. They don't particularly are worried about supply. So that's the nice thing about them. And then if they do crush earnings, I think they will continue to rocket up very quickly. It has been lagging behind Amazon for a while now. And then the next one I got is Google. Google, I think, is just a sleeping giant at this point. Right now, it's sitting on the 200 daily. I think if this holds the 2666 here, we could get a really nice pop out of here back to the 2728. Get a retest. It could even be a higher low. This thing could even drop down a little bit more to essentially. Well, I'd even go down to the 2600 mark and be a higher low. Again, this is my low here. I'm watching that. If it does bounce out of there and then look for that higher highs, you're looking above the 2865. It's got a 80 points coming into this week is expected. So that 80 points, I think, is the biggest move this week. I think it could be a strong possibility. If the market decides to turn and start breaking, this thing will start ripping quite a bit very fast. So it's definitely one of the number one watches I got this week. AMD, I do like the support here. I was in this earlier, essentially off this candle, but got tagged out on this one here. But it is, again, still very strong support. As long as it doesn't break, could probably even say 99. I might re-enter this coming into this week. Again, you get some big ranges here. Earnings is really going to matter for chips, especially because there's so many sanctions that this could really get hit bad. So it's kind of something to be very mindful of. You got to be careful with what's going on with the sanctions, because if it does break here, it could free fall pretty far. So kind of really watching this. But the nice thing about this setup is you can keep a tight stop on this. So if it doesn't break, it could just tag you out before it bottoms out. Um, again, didn't want to swing something like this over the weekend because of the fact that I think there's just better setups, and I think there's a lot of questions about sanctions right now that kind of have to be careful with. There could be new sanctions placed on over the weekend, and then for whatever reason, this thing could tank pretty fast, which it's already done, essentially because a lot of sanctions and the restrictions on semiconductors. So I have that one. GME is another one. Now this one, I want everybody to proceed with caution on this one, because I don't. These things have gone parabolic, and these things shouldn't be at the numbers that they are, but they are because of the current environment we live in. So being said, this is at a really good support. It's at the 200 EMA first retest. I think you're going to get a nice bounce out of this. Again, if it bounces here, it's going to be a higher low. And I think you can get a strong attempt to get back to the 185. Again, you have to be very careful, but it's at a good support. So the nice thing about this is if you enter this trade, to not let it fall below essentially the one, we'll go 150 on this one. Keep a very tight stop on this thing. But I think this thing could, again, if it is a higher low, it could retest this very nicely back up to the 189. And if it does make a higher high, it would need to break that. And then I think you can get some gas to the upside pretty quickly. You can get a nice squeeze. I think a lot of stuff looks like it's getting ready to squeeze. All we need is essentially the word, and stuff can really start popping again. And like I said, I think if we drive this to all-time highs. Again, a lot of moves this week really don't have a lot of expect moves. Again, I think because the market's just waiting on the banks. I do have wing listed here. And this one, you gotta be careful. It is at my support, so I'll be watching this 108 mark. You don't want it below the 108 mark. It does have earnings. It has earnings in about a month, but could get a nice range here back up to the 121 mark. And then if it breaks that, I think it could really make up some ground. Again, there's a lot of stocks. Walmart and Target, I think, are ones I don't have them listed, but your CAT, HD, CVS, I think all those should be on watch. They've already been pumped a lot, so that's why I'm not really pushing them here, because of that fact. If something changes, if we get peace talks, or the war is over or something like that, those things are going to come crashing down. I think it's important to kind of watch those for intraday scalps, because of the fact that people are dropping a lot of money in necessities, those things that you need. You need to have a food, you need to have water, you need to have electricity, you need to have shelter, right? You need these specific things. And so there's a lot of money that's being dropped into those particular value stocks. So you need to pay attention to those over the next couple of weeks. Again, but I think that rotation is going to come out of that, and that's why I'm preparing for the bigger tech, because of that fact. Once big tech flips, it's going to start running, and it's going to run quick. So that's what I prepare for, and if there's nothing else going on, I'll look at those other particular stocks. And I don't like the fact that they've already gone parabolic and they're very high. I don't like to be messing with stocks that high, or provide advice to be looking at stuff like that, especially because I know at any given point, being so high, those things are going to come crashing down. A good example of that would be something like wheat and the commodities that people have been buying into. And then you have these massive crashes. You have to be very careful, because these things can flip very quickly if we get world peace tomorrow, and these things will come crashing down. And so I don't want people investing or trading these things unless you are experienced, and kind of leave those things for another time, and get into other things that are set up a lot better than commodities and other things that are essentially just being held up by current events. So, being said, if you've made it this far, I appreciate you. Go ahead and drop a like button, and I will catch you guys next time.